Heyo, everybody. Welcome to episode 124 of the Creativ Rise podcast. This is going to be a very, hopefully just, fulfilling episode.
Relieving
episode. I hope this fulfills a hole in you. Maybe that has been shot. Maybe you've been shot, and this is gonna give you surgery. We're just joking around, but guys, today's episode is all about how to deal with unhappy clients. Now, if you're listening to this and you've had an unhappy client, you are in luck because you're now gonna know how to deal with them and/or how to deal with them next time. If you're listening to this, you're like, I don't know if this is for me. I don't have unhappy clients.
You will.
You will have unhappy clients. We will talk about that in a second, but. Guys, here's the idea for today's episode. It is inevitable that no matter how good you are at business, you will one day be mistreated by an unhappy client.
Absolutely.
It's just the facts. One day, you will be mistreated. The truth is, when you put yourself out there, when you start a business, when you work really hard to help your clients, when you grow through the growing pains of getting better as a service provider, whatever service you're in, most of the time you're going to get phenomenal responses. And then one day, you are going to wake up to an email or a text from a client, and it is going to rip your freaking heart out. You are going to feel so terrible reading it because they are going to be unhappy. And this hurts. It stabs.
Oh,
it really stabs. And so often in those moments, you're going to open up that email. You're going to question everything. You're going to go, oh my gosh, should I even be running a business? Am I good at what I'm doing? Am I qualified to do this? Do I deserve to be able to get to do this? Is everyone else in town that does what I do, being praised by their clients, and here I am getting shredded by one? It's going to make you question everything. Like, it honestly makes you, for most people, go back to square one and go like, what am I even doing with my life? Which is so funny that it can do that. But as creatives, we pour our heart and soul into what we do. Yeah. And as people trying to work for themselves, it's a big amount of energy to put into running a business, trying your best for your clients and everything. So to have someone feel like it did not meet their expectations, or it was just a terrible experience, whatever that's going to be, whatever they're saying, it's devastating.
And if you're sitting here going, okay, I haven't had one of those types of clients yet, like I'm actually good. I think I'm just actually really just good at what I do. Spoiler alert. This will happen to you. If you are growing a business, if you are branching out, if you're pushing yourself and actually trying to grow and succeed in creative business, you are going to deal with an unhappy client. It has oftentimes the people that are not successful never have an issue because they always just stick to exactly cookie cutter what it is, and they never push past and grow to people they don't know. And oftentimes people that don't know you are the ones who end up mistreating you as an unhappy client. So if you're someone who's going beyond just your local friends, you are going to eventually deal with this. And I just want to say that so many amazing business owners deal with this. Every single growing business owner will deal with this at some point. So it's going to happen to you. Yeah. And be ready. And it's going to help you get ready for it if it has not happened to you already.
Yeah. And just to prove to you that every single one of us will get an email one day that rocks our world, and some unhappy client will be like, you suck. I hate you. I don't know why I chose to work with you. Just to prove that will happen to you. It happens to all of us.
Hopefully not that dramatic.
Maybe not that dramatic. But we just got done with a conversation earlier today where a friend of ours, who is quite literally one of the best photographers we know, we both agree on that, got an email from a client saying, hey, I've picked somebody else for my wedding and your photos suck. And
it was literally so rude.
It literally said that. And for her, that's heartbreaking, right? Because she's like, oh my gosh, like I never wanted that person to have that experience. I'm not sure why they had that experience. She thankfully is like, I know my photos don't suck. Like, this is something crazy going on here. Yeah. And that's devastating for us to hear for her because we've both been in those situations before. I know you've had a situation like that too.
Oh, absolutely. When I was shooting weddings, I remember having a couple just unhappy clients where at the end of the time, they're just so upset. And it does rock your world in a sense. Like in that day, I was like, well, this is the worst day of my life. I'm quitting. I'm putting in my notice of my own business and I am out of here. So it absolutely happens to all of us.
Yeah, it happened to me running an agency. I remember we did a massive rebrand, overhauled somebody's complete marketing, and COVID hit. And COVID really, really put some restrictions on their business and made things very tough for them. And long story short, what we did and what they were doing, what we did, I thought was great. And all of a sudden I woke up to a message one day and they were like, hey, this isn't working. This sucks. And I was like, oh my gosh, like devastated. Like what's gone wrong? And then down the road, I figured out something else was kind of going on. So the point that we want to make right off here with the first example we talked about where they're like, hey, your photos suck, said that to our friend who's a photographer. And then with Christy's example and with my example, anytime you get into one of these situations where you have an incredibly unwarranted, unhappy client, 9 times out of 10, it's not about what it's about.
Yes.
Okay, so they're saying, hey, your photos suck, you didn't give me this, or it's not working, or I don't enjoy working with you. Most of the time, it's actually not about what it's about. We've had examples like this even with Creativ Rise. Like we've had people go through different things with Creativ Rise and have bad experiences. So we thought. And so we dig into it. We use the steps that we're going to teach you guys later on in this episode. And then we realize, oh, this was actually never about Creativ Rise or about what we were doing with them or about you and I or about anybody else in the community. This was not about what they thought it was about, right?
Yes.
And that's just the thing. So I really want to encourage you, if you've had a terrible experience before in the past where a client just ripped you a new one and you really felt like it was unwarranted, I really want to encourage you, it probably was not about what it was about. And so I want you to put that in the back of your brain, because if you have not had that happen to you yet, or you have, it's going to happen to you again, or it will happen to you for the first time, where a client reaches out one day and is just disgusted with you
they
somehow.
use you as a human punching bag, if that makes sense.
And you need to remind yourself that Joey and Christy said, it's not always about what it is about.
Yes.
So we're going to walk through a couple steps today to talk about what that actually looks like.
Although, quick disclaimer, this is not an episode to make you feel good about like the unhappy client if you actually did drop the ball.
This is not for drop the ballers.
This is not an episode if you missed a deadline, if you were super late on your deliverables, if you were rude or like not kind to the client, if you didn't meet their expectations of what you promised you would do and you didn't give them the value that they were expecting. This episode is not for you. This episode is for people who out of the blue have gotten these either nasty or really critical responses to what they gave when they actually maybe didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, so there's really 2 things that you need to do. 2 ways you need to posture yourself in order to deal with an unhappy client before you actually talk to them, okay? So prior to talking to them, there's going to be 2 steps we're going to give you. And then after you talk to them, Christy's going to give you a few more pieces of information that can really help you navigate one of these situations. So step number 1, very important.
Yes, step number 1 is de-escalate yourself first. So many people immediately backlash their clients when they get an unhappy text or an email. People respond immediately. And that is so bad, you guys. Think of it. You are the professional. You're almost like the parent to the child in this relationship. So you want to de-escalate yourself first. So don't respond immediately. Take some time to cool off and cool down, whether that's going for a walk, if that's talking to a friend in the industry who just gets it, which we cannot tell you how important it is to have people in your corner in this industry, you guys. If you don't have awesome people that you can turn to when stuff like this happens, you will often respond in maybe some negative ways, or you will just be so down on yourself. So take some time to get off the defensive and just take some time to de-escalate your own emotions.
Yeah, 100%. And the second thing you need to do before you speak to the unhappy client is you have to triple check. The second thing you need to do is triple check what actually happened. Ask yourself, hey, what are they saying? And is any of this relevant to what I have walked them through? So it is very important that before you go into a conversation or you respond to someone who is very unhappy with you, that you have all the information, you have all the facts, you have a full perspective on these situations. So always take a stance of personal ownership first rather than just blaming them. So I have gotten these emails before, very rarely, again, very, very rarely. This has happened to me like once or twice in my career, over 10 years. Like it's not common, but when it happens, it's like, oh my gosh, where you open up your phone, you're like, what? Like, you've got to be kidding me that they think that right now. You've got to be kidding me that they are saying that about me or about us or about my service or about the team. And it's so easy to go, let me just blame them because I've done all my stuff. But before you do that, just make sure you take personal ownership, you check the facts, you run over everything to make sure that you have proof to then uphold whatever that conversation is going to look like. You never want to go into one of those conversations without checking all of your bases first to make sure that you can just say very logically, hey, look, here's what was promised, here's what happened, all that stuff. So make sure The two things, again, before you actually speak to a client that's very unhappy is, number one, you de-escalate yourself. You distance yourself from the situation just for a little bit. Go for a walk, something like that, just so you can start to process it logically and remove the crazy emotions that are probably present with you. Number two, before responding, make sure you check all of your bases. Take personal ownership. Go, is there anywhere I dropped the ball? And if not, great. But I also need to make sure I'm checking all my bases so I have proof to go into a conversation and actually hold my own.
Yeah. So if you've done those two things, if it really is a client who maybe is just unhappy on something and they're not telling you what it's actually about, this is the way to deal with it. So your goal is to de-escalate them now. So you've de-escalated yourself. You've taken the logic of the situation and gone, here are the facts. Now you go and de-escalate them. So the question is, how do I do this? How do I de-escalate maybe a super emotional or angry, unhappy client? And we actually have a system that we use, and it works, you guys, I'm serious, every time. Like, I'm not kidding, 10 out of 10 times, this system of having a conflict conversation works every single time. Whether this is business, whether this is personal, this is the way you should have that conversation. And pro tip, have it on the phone. Have it in person.
100%.
Get on a call with somebody. I'm not saying you always have to do that, but if it is somebody that you've had a relationship with, that you've performed services for, have this conversation on the phone. Keyboard warriors are a real thing. The Karens are online. Get them in person. It will help. I just promise you it will.
Yeah, and that's just like a literal fact of life, right?
Yes.
Getting somebody on the phone allows you to look at each other. There's a certain level of humanity there where both people can just come down a little bit more, and people will always be more gnarly through a keyboard or through an email or over a phone if they leave you a voicemail, whatever it's going to be, than they would be to your face.
100%.
So it's important to go, hey, how do we both meet each other in a space of respect? And quite often that's face-to-face or it's on the phone.
Yep. So the first thing you need to do to de-escalate the conversation and have the conflict conversation with them is that the first thing you do is empathize. Right? Sorry,
That's
so
tricky.
many words.
That's tricky sometimes.
Words.
Tricky.
Empathize with them. Now, that doesn't mean you agree with them. It means you show empathy towards them. And why do you do this? One, because it actually throws them off their game. I'm serious. You guys, people are expecting you to come in hot. They're expecting you to come in super defensive with your walls up and ready to attack back because they've already attacked you. That's just human psychology logic. They're going to be expecting you to come back at them. However, if you arrive on the phone call calm, and then just express and empathize with them that you understand their situation and that you are so sorry that they are feeling this way and that they are disappointed and that apparently the expectations maybe were off and that you are so sorry that they feel this way and that you want them to have an awesome experience just like every other client, you will watch the emotion in that balloon start to deflate. If you can come in and be like, have a posture of empathy and go, hey, I'm so sorry. And this is where you can even maybe take some ownership over something. Like maybe if you did find like, oh, I didn't give correct expectations on the deadline or whatever it was, that's where you can take ownership and just express that you are so sorry that they feel that way. Again, you're not saying, hey, I agree with you of this thing that is incorrect, or I'm apologizing for something I didn't do, but you can be sorry that they're not having a great experience. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, honestly, you guys, they will often be like, like, it's okay. I know I'm overreacting. Like oftentimes people, because it's so counter to what they're expecting, they'll actually deflate and maybe even apologize back to you.
Yeah, and this is a moment quite often where it's not often about what it's about. Yes. So they might come to you and say, you know what? Thanks for apologizing. And honestly, like, I'm just going through this right now, or this happened to my family, or I crashed my car. And, like this is typically where if you enter the conversation with empathy, something will come out and prove to you that it's not about what it's about. But again, like Christy said, this is the most important part. You are not apologizing for something you didn't do. So you're not going, I'm so sorry that this isn't working out. It's like, hey, I'm really sorry that this has been your experience so far. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I just need you to know that that was never my goal nor expectation for you to get to this point. So I just want to let you know that I hear you, I hear your frustrations, and I'm here to talk about it.
Yeah.
That is an empathetic approach into a conversation that's saying you understand where they're at without agreeing with them, okay? So it's, again, you have to empathize, you get where they're at, and you're there to help them. You're there to listen to them, but you're not there to agree necessarily with the ridiculous, unwarranted frustration that they have about whatever you did or did not do. Okay, so number 2, This is very, very important. After you empathetically walk them into the beginning of the conversation where you say, hey, I get where you're at. I hear you. I'm here to listen. And I'm excited to talk about, what happened. You then have to talk about what happened. Now, how do you do that? They're going to want to talk about it emotionally. They're going to want to go, hey, well, I felt this way when this happened. And you just got to go logically. Okay, what was promised, or what was the expectation? What was the written expectation? What was the follow through supposed to be? Like, just start asking really good questions to them. So, hey, tell me, Christy, imagine you're the very frustrated bride and I'm your wedding photographer. Hey, so talk to me. What were your expectations based on our prior conversations, based on what you and I had actually talked about? Tell me what your expectation was.
Yeah.
So I'm now putting the ball in your court for you to say, well, here's actually what we had a conversation about. This allows the person to actually have to walk back in their brain and go, okay, what did we actually talk about? It de-escalates them from just staying in their emotions, and it brings them hopefully into a little bit of a logical spot where they actually have to talk about what were the signs of, the expectation being dropped or the value not being there. And again, this is quite often where you figure out it's not about what it's about, and you'll never even talk about the problem they thought was a problem because it wasn't a problem in the first place. It's totally irrelevant. You might even be totally irrelevant. You might be sitting there on a call going, why am I even here? This person's like dumping out their heart in like a therapy session to me about something that happened 5 years ago to them that's just come back up. This has nothing to do with me. Yeah. But sometimes when you own a business, we get caught in the middle of these things, okay? Yes. So it's very important. Remember, this part of a conversation, after you create some empathy and then you come in and ask really good logical questions to gain understanding of where you could have potentially dropped the ball or what their expectations were, okay? Remember, this part is to create mutual understanding, not to stomp all over them. So you got to listen well. You ask good questions and then you listen well. Yeah.
Another great question to ask too is, what could we have done to make your experience even better? Because oftentimes it's more of like a feeling. It's like, oh, I'm feeling disappointed or whatever it is, but they actually don't even know what they really want. So if you can ask like, well, what would have made this situation even better? Just to know for the future. That sometimes they go, oh, well, actually, I don't really know. And, they no longer have a case, right? So yeah, let's talk, go into the logical, ask those great questions. And then number 3, come with a solution. So it doesn't 100%. Necessarily mean that you bend to whatever they want, right? Like, this is not like, oh, just if they're like, I want you to reshoot all this stuff and do all these things that are completely out of the contract. I'm not saying this, but I am saying you want happy clients. You don't want to create a terrorist. And I have seen this happen where people get so tight to their contract and they go, this is my justice bone. Like, I will not give the raws for this bride's wedding photos.
You signed the contract. I don't have to do it yet.
Like, all these people that are so contract hungry, and it honestly creates terrorists, and they lose business in the future because they're not willing to have customer service in their business. So you always have to realize customer service is always number 1. So what is a respectful solution for the both of you that you could offer? Like, for instance, when I had an unhappy bride, I re-edited the whole wedding and I did it for free. I was like, I'm happy to do that. And I even offered to give her the raws because at the end of the day, I wanted a happy client, not a terrorist. And so I was like, I am willing to do this so that and then she was so brilliantly happy afterwards. She went and just gave me so much stuff online, was awesome after that. Because I was able to go, hey, what solution can I give that is within my power and my control that respects the both of us? Now, so I would just think about what could be a possible solution to something that you could do to remedy the situation, even if it's something small, because goodwill goes a long way with an unhappy client. So that is the type of conversation you can have. That is the flow. If you can follow that flow and kind of retain your emotions and just think of yourself as hey, how do I help this person? How do I empathize with them? How do I offer logical questions and then give a good solution? Most of the time, you guys, they will turn around and they will give you that love back. They will have a happy attitude, all of that kind of stuff. And if they don't, let them go, right? If they're unblazingly unhappy and that's just what it's going to be and they're just cycling in this unhealthy state, remove yourself from the situation. Go, I've done what all I can do. Tie it up. Send an email that says, hey, we talked about this. Hope for the best for you, right?
Yeah, wish you the best.
Wish you the best. Yeah. Make sure you have stuff like that in writing too, if you have a really unhappy client. So, you guys, if you've got unhappy clients, no, you are not alone.
You're not alone.
And seriously, surround yourself with people who have your back in these things, who get it. People in the creative industry, when they are isolated and this happens, oftentimes they just quit or
Oh,
they
it's
get
devastating.
so discouraged. They
Devastating.
stop offering that service or they never push through to something new because that an unhappy client can be so traumatic. And when you have other people that you can process that with and that they can give you feedback and they can encourage you, it makes all the difference in growing your business. So if you're someone who's like, I don't have any community like that, I do feel like I'm in isolation, or if I talk to my friends, they just ramp me up and like tell her like, oh, go like rip that client a new one or just drop them or whatever. That's probably not a healthy response,
That's
nor a healthy
equally as
community.
destructive as not having anybody, is having friends that are probably not the most mature.
Exactly. So if you are looking for mature creative friends, that's what we love doing in Creativ Rise. We love creating communities where people can connect and support each other and grow their businesses and process the good and the hard together. And one of the best ways we do that is through our Creativ Rise Mastermind. It's our 6-week signature program that basically walks you through how to build an awesome 6-figure creative business surrounded by a group of around 30 to 35 people. Our next one, round 10, is launching September 10th. We are so pumped. If you're on the wait list, you get early access to the application that'll launch on August 23rd to waitlisters only. You'll also get early pricing, all that good stuff. If you want to join that wait list, it's totally free. It's in the link in our bio on our Instagram, and then it's also in this podcast description.
Yeah, 100%, guys. Well, hey, we are cheering for you big time, whether you are someone who's going to join the mastermind one day, you're a mastermind grad, you're someone who just listens to the show, you're part of the community, just part of the greater podcast community. We're so glad you were here. We're so glad that you took some time out of your day for us to speak into your life, hopefully help you through your next unhappy client situation, because again, it's going to happen to you no matter how good you are at what you do. So hope that's such a blessing to your business and to your soul when that happens.
Yes.
And we'll catch you next week. If you have any podcast topic recommendations that you would love for us to cover, we would love to do that for you. That's the only reason why the podcast exists, is to give you guys what you need to help you grow a creative business. You hear it in the intro every single time this podcast starts and in the outro, which will happen in about 2 seconds. So thank you for being here, guys. We'll catch you next week.